Have you ever wondered why your efforts often end in failure? Watch this video until the end, because through scientific experiments, you will learn all the reasons that cause failure and how to escape this bad situation. In 2012, Google launched an experiment. The company examined hundreds of work teams among its employees. They wanted to find out which ones were the most successful. The most logical assumption was this: teams made up of the smartest people produced the best results. Maybe it was the most experienced people, or the best educated ones. But the results were incredibly surprising. Nobody believed the results. The research lasted for 2 full years. During that time, they studied 180 teams. They analyzed more than 250 variables. Who was on the team had almost no importance. How the team worked meant everything. In the end, the one thing all the most successful teams had in common was something nobody expected. You'll learn it in a moment. But first, you need to understand this. We have too many false beliefs about success, and most of these false beliefs lead you in exactly the wrong direction. Today, I'm going to tell you the truths that scientists have discovered over decades. There will be different findings, but they all lead to the same conclusion. Success doesn't actually work the way people think it does. In 2008, Malcolm Gladwell introduced a rule about real success in his book Outliers. To master any field, you need 10,000 hours of practice. This idea had a huge impact on people. Millions said, "So if I work hard enough, I can become successful." That's how most people interpreted it, and it inspired a lot of people. There was just one problem, and it was a big one. Gladwell had misunderstood the research. The original researcher was Anders Ericsson from Florida State University. In 1993, Ericsson studied violin students at a music academy in Berlin. And yes, it was true that the best students had accumulated around 10,000 hours of practice by the age of 20. But that wasn't Ericsson's main finding. In fact, Ericsson later said himself, the 10,000-hour rule is wrong in many ways. So why? The mistake Gladwell made was ignoring the difference between practice and deliberate practice. And the gap between those two things contains the real secret of success. So what is deliberate practice? Ericsson called it deliberate practice, and it means this: working on the areas where you are uncomfortable, where you are specifically weak, getting feedback on your performance, analyzing every mistake, and doing something differently the next time. Ordinary practice, on the other hand, means repeating the same thing over and over again, sticking with what is easy. And that is actually a very bad situation. It often becomes a waste of time. Ericsson's research showed that someone who spends thousands of hours doing ordinary practice can improve less than someone who spends only hundreds of hours doing deliberate practice. The difference is truly enormous. So the question is not, how long are you working? The real question is, how uncomfortably are you working? Because growth begins with the answer to that second question. For decades, Stanford University psychologist Carol Dweck studied one simple question: why do two people with the same level of intelligence produce completely different results? Is there a special reason behind it? Is there a special reason behind it? The answer she found was much simpler than most people expected. Dweck identified 2 mental patterns, and the discovery was extremely important. The first group had what she called a fixed mindset. These people believed abilities are inborn. You either have them or you don't. I'm not good at math because I simply don't have the talent. People in this group tend to give up when they fail or avoid trying altogether to protect themselves from failure. The second group had what is known as a growth mindset. They believed everything can be improved. Failure is part of the learning process. When these people faced the same failure, they worked even harder. In experiments with children, Dweck noticed something fascinating. When a child was praised with, "You're so smart," that child started avoiding difficult tasks in order to protect the image of being smart. But when the same child was praised with, "You worked really hard," the child began choosing more challenging tasks. Even the way we speak can make a huge difference. So how does this connect to success? Research shows that people with a growth mindset experience less performance loss after failure. Teams with a growth mindset also produce more innovation. And most importantly, this mental framework can be learned. It is not something people are born with. That is a very positive message for everyone. But there is something important that is often misunderstood. The popular version of Dweck's research was oversimplified into the message, "Just think positively and everything will work out." Dweck strongly disagreed with that interpretation. A growth mindset is not just belief. It is a growth mindset plus intense effort, plus the right strategy, plus feedback. Only when all of these work together does success become unavoidable. Now, to put this topic on even more solid ground, let's talk about a striking real-world study. A company called Entity Company, CB Insights. Business CB Insights IEL'd startups. They wanted to learn one thing. Why did you fail? Why did your company collapse? The answers, coming directly from the founders themselves, were very different from what most people expected. 35% said, "We built something nobody needed." Think about what that actually means. Take a moment and imagine it. You spend thousands of hours working. You invest money. You build a team. You wake up to him to keep pushing forward. And in the end, you realize that nobody wanted what you created. The second biggest reason for failure was that 38% ran out of cash. But even that was not as simple as it sounded, because there was usually a deeper cause underneath it: poor financial discipline and unrealistic expectations for growth. The third major reason affecting 23% was team problems. And that brings us right back to the Google study. Let's return to Google's Project Aristotle study. There were 180 teams, 2 years of research, and more than 250 variables being analyzed. The researchers were trying to discover what truly made the most successful teams successful. The first thing they examined was who was on the team, which universities they graduated from, how many years of experience they had, what their IQ levels were. But the results were disappointing. None of those factors created a meaningful difference. Then they came across a 1999 paper by Entity Groups of People, Amy Edmondson, Harvard, Amy Edmondson, Urs at Harvard University. It contained remarkable answers. In the 1990s, Edmondson was studying hospital teams. Her expectation was simple: the best teams would make the fewest mistakes. But the data showed the exact opposite. The best teams reported the most mistakes. So why? Because in those teams, people felt comfortable admitting when they had made an error. In weaker teams, mistakes were hidden because people feared someone would be blamed. As a result, hidden mistakes grew larger and larger until they damaged the entire system. Edmondson called this concept psychological safety. It means feeling safe enough within a team to speak up, ask questions, share ideas, and admit mistakes. Google's Project Aristotle study found that teams with high psychological safety were rated as twice as effective by their managers. And according to Edmondson's research, 85% of employees avoid sharing important information because they fear a negative reaction from their manager. Naturally, when that happens, positive progress becomes much harder. A large part of failure comes from a simple problem. People do not say what they know. They hold back because they believe there will be a price for speaking up. As a result, dozens of important questions remain unanswered, and every unanswered question becomes another obstacle standing in the way of progress. One study found that startups that pivot in time, meaning they change strategy when something is clearly not working, are 4 times more likely to succeed than those that remain blindly attached to their original idea. Instagram started as a location-based app called Bourbon. Later, it shifted its focus to photo sharing and changed social media forever. Netflix began as a DVD rental company. Then it moved into streaming and left Blockbuster behind in history. But pivoting has always been one of the most misunderstood concepts in business. A pivot does not mean give up on everything when things go wrong. A pivot means you learn something from the data, and that learning is pointing you in a different direction. It means moving toward that direction. It does not mean throwing away all of your previous effort and starting from zero. It means building something new on top of what you have already learned. So how do you know when it is the right time to pivot? There are 3 questions that must be asked. First, what is the feedback from customers telling you? Not the people who use the product, but the people who choose not to use it. What are they saying? Second, which assumption turned out to be wrong? Every business plan is built on assumptions. Which one failed to match reality? Third, is this a structural problem or an execution problem? If the idea is right, but the execution is flawed, it can be fixed. But if you're building something nobody wants, working harder and faster will only take you to failure faster. Never forget that. When you put all of these studies together, the picture becomes clear. Success does not come from simply working hard. It comes from working in the right place in the right way. It comes from working on your weaknesses, pushing yourself into uncomfortable territory, getting feedback, and constantly improving yourself. Success does not come from teams made up of the smartest people. It comes from teams that can speak honestly with one another. Teams where people are not afraid to ask the questions that need to be asked, get answers, and move forward. Success does not come from blindly sticking to a plan. It comes from learning from data and changing direction when the evidence points elsewhere. And perhaps the most important finding is this. A founder who succeeds with their first startup has about a 30% chance of succeeding in their next venture. First-time founders, on the other hand, have a success rate of only 18%. So yes, experience matters. But the real difference comes from something deeper. Successful entrepreneurs learn from their past mistakes. Those who failed to learn repeated the same mistakes and failed again. That is why the most valuable question is not, how do I become successful? The most valuable question is, what did I learn today? And how much of what I learned was I actually able to apply?